So, Chris Reid, welcome to the Reckon Check-in. My name is Michael Sharp. I'm an independent recruitment consultant. I'm checking in with business owners on how they're seeing the market, what they're noticing, and also what they're focusing on. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself? What do you do?
Not totally dissimilar, Michael. I guess I'm a owner of an independent recruitment company myself. I specialise in the world of IT. Have done some for 19 years now, pretty much for the Auckland market, but do cover elements of Australia as well. But outside of that, I also do job search coaching with individuals, and I also work with corporate teams in and around mindset, mainly looking at how one can drive a high performance culture and develop that through a growth mindset. So I do a lot of work in that area as well.
Yeah, interesting. And I suppose of those three buckets in terms of recruitment, job search coaching, and mindset coaching, what seems to be resonating with clients at the moment? What are people enjoying? What are people asking for? And what's more difficult?
Well, I think it's important before I answer that to put a disclaimer that my business is only sort of 14, 15 months old. So, that
Yeah.
affects things in terms of market presence. But what I've noticed this year, if we look at specifically at 2026, the level of outreach that I've had in and around job search coaching has been far
Yep.
greater than last year. Was that due to my business being completely brand new last year and now it's a year more established? I'm not too sure on that, but I have probably seen fivefold the amount of interest in that particular service. And so I think
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that are still out there struggling. It's been a mixture of people that haven't been able to find employment, but also people that are stepping into the job space for the first time in 3 to 5 years and have heard enough of the rhetoric out there about how much the job search experience has changed and probably know that somewhere in them they need to look at things a little bit differently. So just looking for some help to understand the landscape. So that's definitely kept me pretty busy this year in the first quarter. Recruitment, I guess, is a one-man band in the area of expertise. Like not only in my tech, but I'm quite siloed into the development space. There has been enough work there that has trickled in. I wouldn't for a second suggest that it's boomed, but that's what the job data would indicate as well. Yes, we're recovering, but it's not like it's jumped 25%, especially in Auckland. I appreciate some other areas of the country look like it has kicked off a little bit more. My counterparts in Wellington that I speak to in the tech space seem to have had quite a strong uplift. But we also need to appreciate where that started from. That's a comment that I make to a lot of people. I think when you're comparing the job market, and you can look at the data and get relatively excited, but the reality is we weren't really in the ground floor of the elevator. We're in the basement. So you're comparing it to a pretty low starting point. So I still feel like we've got a huge way to go before we're back to any form of stable growth.
I agree with that. With the job search coaching, I had similar sort of initiatives and reaching out to people, and certainly I had a few job search coaching kind of clients, but it was patchy. There's only so many people who are willing to pay for that, and also interestingly with AI, people can do so much in terms of the CV writing and the value proposition and the cover letter writing, that it really comes back to strategy and confidence, right? So how are you
Yes.
going to present yourself? Who do you approach? Who are the people who are most likely to be able to hire you? Like, how can we reach out and get a meeting with them, right? So, what's been have been the tactics that you've been able to give people that they've most appreciated?
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that sentiment, Mike. I mean, I think the days of a focus around a CV and how well it's written are gone. I don't think a lot of people come to me and they still have that as a focus, and that tells me immediately that they're probably not really thinking about things correctly. I think the idea and the concept of spending so much of your time trying to write the CV that's some magical document that's going to get you the job is a waste of time. So a lot of my time in my job search coaching is really spent on the front end around the strategies and the tactics of how to get attention. I spend quite a lot of time trying to help people understand the game rather than write documents. I think when you look at something like a LinkedIn profile and a CV more specifically, where I spend time with people on those documents is really trying to create more alignment with who they are and what they want. I don't think people quite harness the power of understanding, getting clarity around what the role is that they want and why they want it. And if you can start to create a document that speaks to that, I think that compels people. In the world of AI, we want more human connection, we want more humanism, whereas most people write a CV in a very transactional sort of a way, and it reads more like a job description than it does anything else, and it's just cold and it's very unmemorable. So that's where, on those sorts of things, I will spend a little bit of time, but more for me, it's around trying to help people understand. I use the analogy of a ladder. You can only climb a ladder one rung at a time. You being the best project manager, the best software developer, proving that through an interview process is really rung 3 or 4 on a ladder. When you're looking at a job application process, the first rung is the battle for attention. If you can't get the recruiter's attention, if you can't get through to the hiring manager, it doesn't mean much if you're the best man in the room. And so often it's not about who is best. There's so many factors that are influencing a job application process. And so I try to teach people what I call the Wizard of Oz conversation, because I try to let people know what's going on behind the curtain. I'm trying to educate them around what's happening on the recruiter side, why they're getting ghosted, why they're not getting any cut through, because once they understand why that is and how their current process is actually just feeding that, they can start to operate in different ways. But until you know the rules of the game, how can you possibly play? So that's what a lot of my time is spent doing.
Yeah, I agree. And, I suppose when people, everything's so optimized these days, it's so easy to apply for a job with your thumbs when you're on a bus. If you've got your CV on Seek. So all of a sudden people get 500 CVs, but how do you get the person's attention, right? Well, have you called them, right? And what the other one is, the Auckland City's a pretty small place, and who do you actually know that knows that person that's making the ultimate decision, and how do we find a way through to get those high quality introductions? I think that's where the value still is, and within recruitment is, if there are 1,000 applicants, however many jobs, who are the actual human beings that I can make a high quality introduction to? I read Carol Dweck's book Mindset 2. What was it about that book when you read it that made you think, I'm going to focus on this and have that as my defining kind of expertise and go and become like a mindset coach for people?
I wouldn't say that it came from the book. So the other side of my life is I've been a semi-professional cricket coach for 15 years. So I had spent the front half of that, operating from my traditional conditioning, what I thought a coach was, and the knowledge that I had of the sport. And that had got me so far. I had achieved quite a few things. I was rated as the Auckland Coach of the Year, and I was coaching rep sides and all these sorts of things as my ego tried to climb the ladder towards being something. And that got me to a point that I was appointed to a High Performance Sport New Zealand course, which was a 2-year program to bridge people from the level I was, which was just below your national level coach, into that realm. And that's changed my life. So I was appointed a mentor through that program, a guy called Craig Lewis, who's one of the high performance leaders in New Zealand sport. And that course taught bodies of knowledge. And one of the first, I think it was really, was growth mindset. And I can't say that, like a lot of people, I thought I knew what that was just through the words, not necessarily because I'd read any of the literature. And that material for 2 periods of the course focused very heavily on Carol Dweck's research and the surrounding context of it. And so that really appealed to me for whatever reason, I guess due to how I was raised and who I am. It appealed to me greatly, but it was also incredibly confronting because it made me realize where I was going wrong on so many ways, where my mindset was fixed. And it's part of the work that I do with teams and individuals, because I teach growth mindset in the career coaching that I do with people as well. I do put a disclaimer around it, is that it's not necessarily for the faint-hearted. If you truly are prepared to look at the theory and the literature around it, it should be confronting, because that's what life's about. It's about growth and being uncomfortable at times and being able to be introspective and look at that. And so that's what that course, coupled with at that pretty much the same time, was my first child. And so it just, everything lined up. It was like, well, I've got to sort myself out here, not just for myself, but also for my daughter. I could see how imperative it was going to be that I didn't pass on any of those perspectives and mindset that I had to her, and became a vehicle for me in my parenting as much as anything, as well as the coaching work I was doing and recruitment. But the thing I guess about growth mindset that's so interesting is it's I guess it's a continuum. You're not one or the other. In different parts of your life, you're more fixed. More parts of your life, you're growth. And I could see in my recruitment life how I had applied in a number of really critical ways a growth mindset, and that had attributed to the success that I had for a very prolonged period of time. But certainly in other areas, I could see where I was definitely in a dark corner and was pretty fixed.
Yeah, that's one of the things I definitely do remember, because about the book, because you have this like, oh hey, it's a simple binary, right? Where you just say, okay, this person's got a fixed, this is a fixed mindset, this is a growth mindset. We want that one. That's good. This one's bad. And then at the end of the book, you're kind of like, actually, to be honest, I don't always have a growth mindset for everything. It's the sort of thing that you actually have to catch yourself to be able to say, hang on, am I really trying my hardest? Or is it possible that I have had a few kind of setbacks in that course and I've just given up entirely? Mathematics is a really interesting one with, my wife's in education, right? And they, with their professional development, they have mathematical mindsets. And at a certain point, every person has basically decided, I've done enough maths. I don't need to improve anymore. It's not, or maths is not for me. Whereas actually, all of us can improve our maths at any stage of our life. We just have decided that it's okay to give up. And we've chosen to give up.
With maths.
yeah, and it's because it's a difficult thing, right? It's like weightlifting for your brain. But when you've got a child and they have to struggle through it, and so how do you actually to just tell them that you're essentially doing weight training for your brain? Your struggle is making you stronger. And praise their effort, and don't let them if they get something wrong, make their first thought, okay, why did I get that wrong, and what would give me a better outcome next, right? So, it's growth mindsets shows up everywhere, but it's really interesting when you apply it to running your own business in a environment that we're operating in, which has had relatively low business confidence for a couple of years now. It's hard because there's so much trial and error involved, and we have to keep trialing and keep erroring in order to be able to pick that path to be able to make enough money to feed our families, right? I think that we've got these inner self-critics that will be what is actually giving us those fixed mindsets to be able to say, you're not good at this. You should give up, or whatever it is. And it's actually challenging that inner critic, which is the hard part every day.
Yes, I guess my workshop that I run with corporate teams is half mindset theory and practical bits that bring it to life, but it also has a half of a focus around self-awareness, because if you can't learn to identify that voice in the head, if you can't learn to identify where you're fixed in your mindset, it doesn't mean much. You can't change what you can't see. And so that's part of the process, and I think that's fortunately for me why I was able to I think move into the topic so quickly, is because I had spent a lot of time around more the self-awareness piece, and so it didn't come well, it perhaps made it a little bit more real for me too, because I could see it a little bit more clearly. But that is very, very critical, that you start to learn to understand and have an ability to step back and be the observer of your conditioning, because that's what most of us unfortunately just work around as is our past interactions and experiences, and therefore our conditioning rules our life. We're not actually introducing the element of choice, and that's fundamentally what I teach, is to try and give people the understanding, but without the choice it's still not worth much. So it's trying to empower people with that ability to see it, so that they can introduce what they want to do as an option.
One of the things that one of the protocols my friend has given me, who is involved in this sort of coaching work, is essentially daily 1 minute of self-talk. As you might do your kind of meditation or your breath work or something like that, but if you just a minute of reminding yourself of your good points. You've got 19 years of recruitment experience. There's not a job within IT that you haven't filled. You've got a deep network within Auckland, but actually saying this to yourself and reminding yourself of all of the accomplishments that you've got, and why talking to you would be valuable before you actually pick up the phone, or before you go into the meeting, or doing it every day, actually strengthens that kind of self-belief. Whereas like, if you're actually not doing that positive self-talk, then you're left with the critical self-talk in your brain, and you're going to go nowhere.
Yeah, I think there's a interesting clip. I can't remember who the individual was, but it's about what's the better return of investment? Is it, in the instance of the example you gave, is it boosting the positive things you do and repping that, like you're talking about being in the gym, or is it becoming aware of the negative self-talk and what impact that has. And his belief, and I would agree with it entirely, is that there's far greater return on investment of being able to identify the negative self-talk and asking yourself, is that real? Is that who
Yeah.
I am? Because if you can free yourself from that, the other parts naturally become blooming, I guess, to lack of a better term.
It's
So
interesting you say that because the guy Clifton from Clifton Strengths Finder, he would say the opposite, right? Where if you're working on the things that you do really well, then you're going to become enthusiastic about doing that because you're going to get better results. Whereas if you're focused on your weaknesses all the time, it can be discouraging. So you actually have to
focus is the
be
wrong.
deliberate about that. But I can see your perspective in that.
Yeah, no, focus is the wrong
Actually,
term.
challenging that negative self-talk and be able to say, is that true? What's a
It's your
different way to
orientation
look at
to
it?
it. It's the
Yeah,
orientation to it. It's about becoming distant from it because it's the attachment that's the problem. So when you say
yep,
focus implies attachment. Attachment is the problem. Was when you attach to something, you become it, and that's what most people do. Is they walk around as a reaction, their emotional reaction to instances, and that's because they're unconsciously attached. If you can learn to train the observer to be seeing what is real and what isn't, that's where the strength
yep,
comes. And so it's
nice.
very, very different than what you're describing there. And so it's learning to understand and challenge what you are and what you aren't, that where the real power lies. And
Yeah,
that's what I would encourage people to to focus on more than necessarily challenging it and going, okay, I'm not that. That's a very different energy, and that can
yeah.
become quite compulsive as well.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your insight. Is there any other thing that you'd like to, any other reckons that you'd like to share? We were talking about, I suppose the direction to travel in the economy, business confidence, how it's going. We're working with, a lot of uncertainty around war in Iran and all these sort of things, and not really knowing what you want to do. How do we best navigate uncertain times and have productive days within it?
Yeah, I think from an individual standpoint. So if we even to speak about the world that we live in as individuals being a one-man band, but if you're out there as a job seeker as well, and maybe you're in between jobs as well, the only thing that I can suggest is an element of acceptance. The reality is at the present point, the only thing that seems to be certain from day to day, and I think this has been this for 6 years, is uncertainty. Everything changes. We live in a world now that is dominated by technology, and a particular technology that doubles in strength every 4 months. There's a new model that comes out every other week that changes the game. And it's the speed of change that is, I believe, the major issue within society at the moment, and it brings in a great deal of anxiety and overwhelm, which is really troubling to people. Most people can't deal with that, and it's totally understandable. And we're at a time now where that just seems to be greater than ever. Then you chuck on the top of it what looks like World War III, and it's pretty dark. It's pretty hard. And so how does one deal with that? Well, I think it starts with an acceptance of what is, but also a layer of understanding on top of that of control the controllables. That's all we can do, and that's, if you want to use the term mantra, something that I speak to myself about. The definition of anxiety is trying to control something out of your control. New Zealand is the tail end of the whip. We are a little country at the bottom of the world. We are not going to have any impact on the global economy, we are going to be reacting to it. If this war continues on and starts to spread itself, I don't know if China invades Taiwan or whatever goes on here, if things start to become more grim, yeah, the only thing that we can really do is probably be quite grateful we're at the bottom of the world away from it all. But that hardship will flow down here. Inflation inevitably will rise. At the present point, I don't see any example of that affecting the job market and all the people I speak to. I haven't had one instance of someone saying, we're putting this role on hold due to uncertainty. We just don't know what's going on with the future. I'm having contracts extended. I just did two yesterday through till January next year with a large insurance entity. So yeah, they clearly had the confidence to do that. So it's still all right at the moment. I'm seeing plenty of jobs being posted by other recruitment agencies, and I'm having work come in as well to me. So at present, I believe it's still positive, and so I would encourage people to again operate with what you know. Keep your focus short today. What does today look like? Is there a job I'm interested in today? How can I control that process and reach out and put my best foot forward? That's all we can do. What will be next week? Who knows? The world changes so quickly, even with this war. Like the price of oil doubling in a week. We don't know what next week is going to bring, and that's the absolute reality. We have to keep our focus very, very short, almost hour to hour.
I actually think we can do more than that, and one of the things that I have. One of the things you've realized is it's not ignorant to ignore some stuff. You actually don't need an update on, Donald Trump's latest tweet before breakfast. You can protect yourself because there are some things that will condition you to focus on the things that are outside of your control, like you're saying. And, I just think of these kind of songs like, What a Wonderful World, where someone goes on a meditation retreat, they've got no technology and they're not talking to anyone, and they come back thinking, they notice the colour of the sky, the feeling of the grass underneath their feet, and it's a wonderful world. Whereas if we're on our devices and we're on our social media feed, the world's ending. It's like, well, you just don't pay attention to the phone as much, you actually deliberately say, I'm not paying attention to that.
I'd agree. I think that's to my point about controlling the controllables.
And your attention is controllable.
100%. I had this conversation with my mate because I'd been following the war and the developments there quite closely, and I had a conversation with him last Friday, and I said, "Oh, mate, look, I'm sorry, no more war chat from me. Like, it doesn't do me favors. It's only grim, and again, what impact can I have?" So, I think that is very, very true. And again, that just comes down to what you prioritize. One can feed into your sanity, one can feed into your overwhelm, I guess. And so, I think that's a really, really valid point from you. And
I think the goal is actually a sense of agency and control over our life. So if we focus more on the controllable, then we build a sense of agency. Regardless if we're trying things and they're succeeding or failing, but if we are in that pocket of the controllables, then we're going to get more of a sense of agency over our life. And that's ultimately the goal. And that's for everyone who's applying for jobs or everything. You can apply for 1,000 jobs, but maybe making a few phone calls might be within your control and have more of a positive outcome on you. Equally, walking down the road and putting flyers saying that you'll mow the lawns for a bit, or whatever it is, and volunteer. I coached my son's water polo team, and it was a brilliant thing to do. I never had the chance to do that when I was working 8 till 5:30. The more that you can engage with community organisations and do constructive things, the more of that sense of agency you will have.
Yeah, lovely. I agree with you. That's really good to hear, and I think that's one of the things for me with running my own business that I appreciate, even when the times are hard, is the autonomy and the ability to do what I want when I want, and mainly that revolves around being there for my daughter as much as I possibly can. And so, totally agree with you. There's plenty of opportunities out there. It's all about our perspective and how we look at something.
All right, nice to talk to you, Chris. I'll leave you to your day.
All right.
I appreciate your insights.